Welcome back to Her Birth, Her Story, where we share real birth experiences. I'm Brooke, your host, and on today's episode, we sit down with Julie, who is a mom of 3. And she has 3 very different birth stories, all starting out as home births. Each one takes a little twist and turn of its own. So you do not want to miss this episode. I think that this episode, even though we talk about hospital transfers, I really think that this gives you a better understanding of how midwives can also be trained to know when a hospital transfer is needed. We also dive into the importance of choosing your birth team and making sure that you have people in your birth team who can truly support you. That starts with obviously your spouse, but really focusing on your midwife. And just because your midwife has the letters behind their name, the qualifications, does not mean that that is the right choice for you. It also has to be someone who you can trust, who you feel safe with. And Julie really jumps into that for us, especially from the transition from her first to her second and third. And she also ended up hiring a doula, and we talk about the importance of her doula and how that support really just meant so much to her. Please join me as we hold space for Julie's story. Hey, Julie, thank you so much for coming on Her Birth, Her Story. Can you go ahead and introduce yourself for us?
Yeah, I'm Julie, and I have been married to my husband for almost 12 years now. And we have 3 daughters. They are 7, 4, and the baby just turned 1.
That is awesome. Before we dive into your birth stories, how did you view pregnancy and birth before even becoming pregnant?
Yeah, so my husband and I always say, I joke that essential oils were kind of our gateway drug into like the holistic and living. And so we had done, essential oils and Whole30s and just really were on board with a holistic view of doing life. And so I also have a huge fear of needles. And so the thought of like an epidural, again, I know that sounds so funny, like, oh, I'll go through an unmedicated birth and I won't do a needle. But that was I was like, you know what? I don't like hospitals. They are for sick people and I don't like needles. And so it was like, okay, we're going to pursue a home birth. And my husband, he's so laid back that he just is kind of like, whatever
Awesome.
you say. And so he was quickly on board.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome because to be honest, like you don't really hear a lot of people choosing home birth for their first. It's always,
Right.
Well, I'll do an unmedicated at the hospital. And then if that goes well, then I'll definitely do a home birth for my second. So what really, besides maybe the not wanting an epidural for the needle purposes, because I can definitely relate to that because that's one of the big kickers why I did unmedicated too, because that epidural needle is scary.
I know.
Yes.
Yeah.
But what made you choose home birth for your first?
I just had it kind of set in my mind that was where I was going to feel most comfortable. And I was in like a crunchy mom group. And so I had heard women share their stories and I was like, oh, I could do that. I'm also very much someone who, if you tell me I can't do something, I'm like, okay, I'll prove you wrong. And so really we just jumped in and I just knew that home is where I would feel most comfortable.
Yeah.
And so that was the route that we just pursued.
Yeah, that's awesome. And did any of your friends or family or anybody have a home birth that you knew of? Or was it really just that crunchy moms group that helped you?
Yeah, nobody close to me had a home birth that I can recall. We definitely had a lot of family showing concern. We were having the first grandbaby on my husband's side and the first grandbaby after like 13 years on my family side. And so there was just a lot of like concern, but we also kind of knew there might be some reservations going in. And so we actually didn't share our pregnancy for quite a few weeks with anybody. We just kind of enjoyed, just the 2 of us and seeking out the midwife that we wanted. So yeah, nobody close had done a home birth before.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. Just because like I said, I just always feel like, especially when you're not like second generation crunchy or second generation home birth, or like your siblings didn't like have home births too, it can be really hard to make that step to do a home birth, just because it is kind of against the grain in a sense.
Yeah.
But no, I think that's awesome. So I'm just going to let you tell your first birth story uninterrupted.
Yeah. So with my first pregnancy, I was working at the time. And so I had worked. I felt I'm one of those people that like loved pregnancy. I loved everything about it. When we searched for a midwife, we wanted somebody that was like the most qualified, right? So even though we wanted a home birth, we were like, okay, we want someone that we feel safe with. And the midwife that we chose, she had all of the qualifications, all the letters behind her name. She had a beautiful website. And so we met with her and I liked her. But in hindsight, looking back, I always had a reservation. But I just kind of wrote it off because again, she seemed like the best of the best. And so that's who we went with. And we saw her for prenatal care. I saw my chiropractor. And then we got to my due date. My due date came and went. 41 weeks came and went. 42 weeks came and went. And that, again, physically, I felt great. I felt really good. But obviously, I had shared my due date, which for the second and third pregnancies, I didn't. I gave a very general, like, this is when I'm due. I kind of overshot it to give a buffer. But mentally, I knew the baby had to come out, but I was like, okay, all of these questions are coming in, doing like, are you seeing a doctor now? Just all of the questions. And so 43 weeks came. And I think around 42 weeks, I stopped working because, again, mentally I was checked out, but physically, I felt great. And so for her labor, my first labor, I labored all night. They were timeable, they were, tolerable. But then I woke up and nothing. So I was like, okay, So then went to bed that next night, same thing. They were timeable. I could breathe through them. They took focus. And so, yeah, I just made my midwife, my birth team aware. She had a bunch of people that, were on her team. And she was like, eat some protein, like get some rest, do, what you need to do. And then that third night, the same thing happened. I had some bloody show. I was losing some of my mucus plugs. So I knew like things were happening. And she sent some of her birth team and they showed up. And I just remember like going internal. It was my first labor, so I didn't know what to expect, but I had kind of shut everybody out. I wasn't really like talking. There were just so many people and I was just like so checked out and so, exhausted. And my husband thankfully was like, can we just have a minute, alone? And so I really appreciated that he could see that I was just like having a hard time. And so again, I would get in the bathtub and I would try to labor there. I had my pool set up, my affirmations, like everything. But again, I think that hesitation and reservation that I had been feeling, I think that came into play there. I just felt like this is a lot. And I was pushing. I remember I got to a point where I was like able to push, but I don't even know that I was ready necessarily to push. I didn't feel, FER that people talk about, that fetal ejection reflex. My midwife also said that I had a cervical lip. And so she was like holding that out of the way as I was pushing. And I was just getting nowhere. I was so tired, so exhausted. And she checked on baby's heart rate. We didn't know the gender either. So she was like, I think you're having some D cells, with baby. I'll call the squad just to sit and just stand by. Well, they obviously aren't just going to sit by and like wait around. So I remember after she said that, I was like pushing and pushing, like, I don't want to go to the hospital. I don't want to do this. So I was like giving it all I had. And the squad came in and they took me. And I remember riding in the ambulance. My husband was like, I can see her. Like, I can see her. And so I knew like we were so close. We were so close. So we get to the hospital. And my midwife had not prepared them or like called ahead or anything. And so they were just kind of like, okay, we've got a baby having D cells. We're going to go to the ER, get this baby out, But because I knew that we were so close, I was like, I do not want a C-section. Like, I don't want to do that. My husband was like, I can see baby's head. Like, just let her push. So they like entertained that for a minute. They let me push. And then she still wasn't coming out. And so they were like, we want to do an episiotomy. And at that point, I was just like, okay, like, go ahead. And I remember that moment and just like screaming and like locking eyes with my husband and he's just, tear. It was just like, so it was really, really hard.
Yeah.
But then she came out, they took her. And again, it was all such a whirlwind. And then it was like, oh, what did we have? And they told us it was a girl. they took her away, and then I was taken to like postpartum recovery. And I don't remember, other than like there were doctors and nurses asking me so many questions, like, did you have prenatal care? There was a social worker that was called to come and like ask questions. And again, I had just been through this traumatic birth and everyone's interrogating me, and it was just, horrible. And so I got some rest, but it was pretty cool. I immediately went into mom mode. And so if I couldn't have her, I was going to pump. And so I was pumping every 2 hours around the clock. We got to go see her. And I remember my husband saying, like, she's really bruised. Like, he was almost, I think when he first saw her, she was so swollen and bruised that it was kind of scary. And so he was like, she might look really bad. Again, because she was trying to come out like this instead of the top of her head. And so we got to see her, but we weren't allowed to hold her. I couldn't breastfeed her.
Really?
Which was really hard. She had an umbilical like IV line, and they didn't want that to come out. So they didn't want, us to hold her. So that was really hard. I went back to my room and I was pumping all night. And then the next day we finally like got to hold her. The on-call NICU doctor said, I think it would be best, even with the lines, to get her like skin to skin, get her breastfeeding. And so that was obviously amazing. She did really well for everything that she had gone through. She latched right away. She nursed really well. And I got discharged from the postpartum unit. And so it was really cool that even with the hospital not being the most respectful, in the NICU, they let us stay with her full time. So we like slept in chairs in there. Wow. And then we got to bring her home. I think it was like 2 or 3 days later.
Good.
The birth team, my midwife didn't come, but her like doulas and like trainees came. And so it was really cool to get to process the story and everything that transpired with them. And I think God was just so kind, because even with that trauma, my postpartum, I had no postpartum depression, no postpartum anxiety. Like, I had forever wanted to be a mom, and here I was being a mom. And so it was like the most beautiful postpartum experience. And yeah, it didn't go at all how we planned, but it was really cool.
Yeah. No, I love that, you still saw God's goodness too in your story, even though it was not anything of what you had planned and it was a lot of trauma. But one thing I do have to say, like, your husband advocating for you at home, just saying like, hey, we need a minute. Like, that is amazing. And also just helping you advocate for when you got to the hospital of like not wanting a C-section. What gave you guys the strength to really say no to a C-section when the hospital staff was just really pushing for it?
I think 2 things. One, knowing that he could see her. Like, I felt like in order to do a C-section, they would have to like maneuver her back up, or I don't know. I just felt like we've already come this far, but also it only had to have been God, because I'm just naturally a people pleaser. So if someone tells me to do something, even if I disagree, sometimes I'm like, okay, whatever you say. But I think, my husband advocating, knowing that she was right there. And knowing what I know now about facial presentations, I mean, they are normally born via C-section. And so it was just really amazing that for a first-time mom and for a facial presentation, that I walked out of that birth with a 2nd-degree episiotomy, and that was it.
Yeah.
So
I know that you had mentioned too that, you were pumping a lot and the bonding part was a little bit harder at first because they wouldn't let you like hold your baby and stuff. How did that really impact you, maybe physically, spiritually, emotionally?
I think initially it was really hard. Another thing I should mention is because she had the blistering, they were treating that as an infection, even though it was most likely from the way she was trying to come out. So we had to get in full, like, we would have to scrub down and put on like, gloves and, surgical attire. But there were also some nurses that were just so kind. They were like, you can like bring that down or do whatever you need to do. But I think that drove me more to protect my postpartum space when we got her home. I don't think she left my chest for weeks, because I just was making up for lost time. And yeah, I don't know. Again, I was pumping around the clock and I was doing all these things. So I still felt like, I'm a good mom. I'm doing what she needs and this is what she needs right now. And this is, if I can't nurse her and I can't hold her, I can pump. My husband's passed out from everything, sleeping on the couch. And I'm just up every 2 hours, just like doing what I could, even if it wasn't having her,
Wow.
latched right away.
Yeah, that's awesome. How did you take this experience and prepare for your second?
Yeah. So I was even more driven to have a home birth because I just knew that I wanted that time with her at home and I didn't want it interrupted and I didn't want her whisked away. I didn't want any of that. But I also knew, you hear a lot, well, you had a healthy baby. So praise God for that. And that is true. But I also went through trauma. And so I think dealing with that, an ambulance siren would go by the house and I would feel my body just like tense up. And it was actually my friend that said, I think you should go to counseling and you should get help. And so I did. I went through counseling, mainstream counseling, and then actually a friend in a mom group was training to be a birth coach. And so I was like, that's interesting. I had not heard of that. And she was offering, free phone calls and I'm like, okay, sign me up. I'm sure I could process through some stuff. And so I met with her and my type A perfectionist brain is not artistic at all. And so when she told me we were going to be going through like this book that has art therapy, I'm like, okay, this is not going to be beneficial. But it was so helpful. It helped me to see things that I hadn't acknowledged in mainstream therapy.
Yeah.
And so I just did even more. I had prepared a lot for my first birth, but I did even more prep for the second time around and just reminding myself that, okay, I've done this before. I know what I want and what I don't want. I also knew I needed a different midwife that I trusted wholeheartedly. I think that's so important that if you have any reservations, tune into that. And a midwife doesn't need all the certifications necessarily. It's the hours and the training, and a lot of them, might even be more qualified. They just don't have the certificate, So yeah, we switched midwives and did a lot of counseling to process and then move into our next pregnancy and birth.
Yeah, and I want to hit on that really quick before we jump into your second birth story. Is there any words of wisdom or encouragement that you can give to a mom who maybe had a traumatic first birth and, maybe they are considering counseling or just trying to figure out where to go to really redeem that experience?
Yeah, I think a lot of prayer, a lot of acknowledging what happened. Don't try to write yourself off and just, oh, it wasn't that bad or it wasn't what, someone else experienced. Do the counseling. If there's birth coaches that you can find, do, some coaching calls, process the birth, and then just acknowledge that no two births are the same. And so you just kind of, as much as I love to be in control, you just kind of go into it with an open hand and say, okay, God, like, you're in control here, and trusting that he was teaching me through that birth and that pregnancy, and he'll do the same. He's not going anywhere for any subsequent pregnancies.
Yeah. No, that's really good. So now I want you to just go ahead and start with your second birth story.
Yeah. So with my second pregnancy and birth, I was home full time. I had quit my job to stay home with my oldest daughter. I also learned about Webster certified chiropractors. That was something I didn't know. I had just seen my regular chiropractor that I had seen since middle school. And so sometimes I wonder if that's why she maybe wasn't in an optimal position. So I saw a new chiropractor that not only did your basic adjustments, but she made sure my pelvis was in alignment, that baby could get into a good position for my next delivery. I worked out a lot. I was very active. I wasn't confined to, a desk all day with her. And I also was intentional to prepare my daughter for what birth would look like, what it would sound like. We watched a lot of home birth videos together. We had hired a new midwife who didn't have a team. She was kind of standalone. And I went back and forth and decided to also hire a doula. And she was great. Not only did she meet with me during my prenatal care, but she also met with my daughter and really built a relationship with her so that my daughter felt comfortable. We didn't have family and friends that we wanted to send her off with. And so it was just really important that she felt safe and comfortable with our birth team as well. And so with her labor, 40 weeks came and went. And I was used to this. I was ready for this. 41 weeks came and went. And I should also mention my first daughter, even going 43 weeks, was only 6 pounds, 7 ounces.
Wow.
And so I firmly believe she needed that extra time. She wasn't a huge baby by any means. But anyways, 41 weeks came and went. And then it was around 41 weeks, 3 days. I labored all night, woke up to nothing. Like, oh my goodness, here we go again. And then I think it was that second night I had labored out on the couch, just kind of sitting over the back of the couch. And I remember the sun coming up that morning and I was just so defeated. I was like, here we go again. I'm so tired. And Nancy, I felt great. It was that mental and emotional, just messing with me. So I'm laying on the couch and, the second daughter was super active in the womb. She was known for kicking hard, dislocating ribs. I mean, she was wild in there and she's still wild to this day. But I'm laying on the couch and I feel this giant kick. And then I hear and I feel this pop. And it's like, I think my water broke, which I had not experienced with my first. And so, we have all the birth supplies. So my husband grabs a Chuck's pad and I waddle to the shower and I just remember letting my water kind of leak. And I was like, okay, like I think we're doing this, but also maybe not. Maybe I'll be in labor, for another day or two. And within 5 minutes, things picked up. And so my husband had let my doula and my midwife know to come over. And again, this was early morning and they came in. It wasn't a ton of people this time. They came in quietly, almost as if like sneaking in. It was not anything loud or disruptive. I was just kind of in my birth space. And so we filled the birth pool in our bedroom. We had the twinkle lights on. The affirmations were up on the wall. My daughter had woken up. And so she was with me. And my doula got right to work, pressing on my lower back. My hip bones is all that I remember of that birth is just saying my bones hurt. And so she was doing that counter pressure. And my midwife just kind of stood there in the doorway, just kind of watching, listening to baby. And they both knew my first birth. And so they were like, you're doing great. You're doing this. Baby is doing amazing. Just reaffirming,
Yeah.
And they knew they knew exactly what to say. And I was just kind of riding the waves at this point. FER kicked in, I couldn't not push at that point. So I'm just like bearing down with my body, making these low sounds. And then in between, I remember having a hard time like coming out of them. And they were like, your control is great. Bring your breathing back, and that was, again, exactly what I needed to hear. I felt so safe, so seen with them. I mean, just all the feelings that you want. My midwife asked me, if I wanted any touch. And I was like, yeah. And so I delivered her head. And it was at that point that I was like, we're doing this. I remember reaching down, feeling her hair like swaying in the water. And I was like, oh my gosh, just so like in labor land, but also so present and just so excited. And then she came out. I was on all fours. She came out. They pass her to me through my legs. And I just leaned back and I'm holding her. And my husband's here and he's crying. And my daughter's right here, like touching her. And she is like, come on, Jess, come pet her. And it was so sweet. And nothing was rushed. It was just so calm. I had all the emotions, all the tears. There is nothing like that. I looked at my husband and I was like, let's do that again.
Yes.
And, our husbands are like, are you crazy? Because they're not, I don't know. I was just riding the birth high at that point. And we got out of the bed and we had skin to skin and we ordered food. And I'm sure they cleaned up and everything, but I was not. It's funny how you're not even aware. Even then, I was just focused on our new little baby and our family. I mean, textbook perfect. Best day. I just loved every bit of that birth. There was even the ring of fire. I don't remember experiencing that. It was the best birth. I loved my second's birth.
Yeah, that is amazing. Did you ever have to overcome any fear during that birth of the fear of possible transfer?
I processed a lot of that ahead of time. I think when I was pushing, maybe subconsciously, I thought that a little bit, but I don't remember it being like all consuming at all. Again, a lot of what my doula and my midwife were saying to me were probably encouraging, like I was doing this. And again, reminding me that baby sounded great. There was no concern. And then once her head was out, it was, I mean, any sort of fear was gone at that point.
Yeah. And can you kind of just like walk us through what it was like having your oldest daughter there to really witness that healing moment for you?
It was so cool. We still talk about it. We still talk about her sister's birth. Um, and she just loved that, like, we didn't go anywhere. Again, I didn't want us to just up and leave and, disappear, but I remember she was in her little strawberry nightgown and she had taken that off. And so it was just, I have sweetest little pictures of the two of them just skin to skin laying in bed. She got to watch a show, which is a no screen family. She was in her glory.
Yeah.
Yeah, she just loves it. She's really happy that she got to be there for that.
That's amazing. I love that. So then after this birth, how did you prepare for your third?
Yeah, so with my third, I knew I wanted the same birth team. They were amazing. My midwife is very practical, calm, and straightforward, not so much emotional, but we trusted her with the medical, the care side. And my doula was just the emotional support, the empathy that I needed, the prayers that I needed. We knew we wanted them again. Something I forgot to mention with my first two pregnancies is I developed like a little skin rash that was so new for me, but it was tolerable. They chalked it up to, pregnancy hormones. Um, but with my third, again, the pregnancy was great. Loved being pregnant. In the third trimester, the rash got out of control.
Mm.
Took over my body, my face, my belly, my arms, my legs. And I had seen my midwife, my chiropractor had done some muscle testing and other testing. I saw a naturopath, a primary care doctor, and I remember being really scared. Everybody was telling me that everything was fine. It was just pregnancy, but it was so severe that I was just so anxious and we couldn't, like, nothing helped. It was hard to wear clothes, so I didn't leave the house. It would get worse at night, and so I would sleep with ice packs, and it was just like the kind of itch that you couldn't not itch. It was
Yeah.
so bad. And so that took a lot of my mental and emotional energy. I'm mom to two little toddlers at this point, and managing the home and being pregnant and everything that comes with that. And it was really, really hard. I remember communicating that with my birth team and they felt for me, but again, there was no relief. And so I was listening to, as my due date approached, I was listening to my birth playlist that I had of worship music. I had Christian hypnobirthing, and these are things I used with my previous two births. But I remember listening to them feeling so frustrated because they weren't bringing me peace. They weren't bringing me any relief. I was angry with God. I was angry that He wasn't healing and bringing relief. My head was not in the right space going into that labor. But we did everything. We set up the birth pool, the twinkle lights, the affirmations, all of the stuff. We were ready to go. And again, due date came and went. And at 40 weeks, 5 days, I think is when I started showing signs, losing some of my mucus plug, some cramping. I would labor during the night again. And so again, this was nothing new to me, but I was just really scared. I didn't know if I could do it again. I was so concerned about the itching and then throw in contractions. I'm like, how am I going to do this? And so I communicated that with my midwife and my doula, and they were so encouraging, like, you've done this before, you can do it again. But I was like, I don't want to.
Yeah.
I was so checked out. I didn't want to. And so I had called my doula and talked with her, and she was like, I'm going to come over. I'm just going to sit at your house. I've got work that I can do in the living room. I want you to not just rest. I want you to go to sleep. And so Erin took the girls outside. I rested off and on, and she left to go have dinner with her family. And within an hour, again, I had no like consistent contractions. They were like 10 to 15 minutes. And I called her and I said, I want an epidural. I want to go to the hospital. I don't know what that looks like, but I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. She was like, okay, well, I know a midwife at this hospital that we had heard great things about as far as supporting like home birth moms and people that wanted to go like a more holistic route. And so she had made that call, but the midwife that she knew was not there that evening. But I still, and this is a total God thing, that I was just so at peace about that decision. There was no, like, hindsight, I wasn't afraid to go to the hospital. I wasn't even thinking about leaving my girls overnight for the first time, or my husband, like, what's he going to feed them for dinner? I got to have all their snacks. I was just, we're going to the hospital. I'm getting an epidural. And that was all I could think about. And so we loaded up the van and drove the 40 minutes. It was farther away. And my midwife was like, oh, they're not going to induce you. You're not really in labor. And I was kind of frustrated with her not like supporting me in that. But I think she just wanted, she knew I could have a home birth. And I think she wanted that for me. But she's like, I'll stay home. I won't go because we'll see if they'll even admit you. They won't induce you until you're 41 weeks anyways, which I would have been at midnight. So I was so, I was so close.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, like we're going. And we went, they hooked me up to an IV, which was the worst part of the whole experience. They couldn't get the IV. My doula was there and I'm just weeping over this horrible IV. And yeah, they checked me. I think I was at a 2 or a 3 at the time. So, not very far, but I also knew that that didn't really matter. And so the on-call OB saw me and just kind of got familiar, and she was really sweet. Everybody I saw was so sweet. There was no judgment. And then the nurse came in to check me again, and I remember telling her, like, I feel like really wet. And so she's like, well, let's see if your water broke. And sure enough, my water had like started to trickle a little bit. So I was like, okay, like things are happening. And contractions started to pick up again, which I knew was a good sign that I felt safe. I wasn't shutting down, stalling labor. Contractions picked up and they brought in like twinkle lights and candles without even me having to ask. They were just like, here are some things. Here's a peanut ball. So I let them break my water and we put in the call for the epidural. And he got there and, the epidural, I couldn't even tell you if that was horrible. It must not have been because I don't remember it. I remember again, the IV more than the epidural itself, but I got the epidural and I rested and I slept. And then they came in and they were like, do you have any pressure? Are you feeling anything? And I'm like, feel great, doing great. This is what I wanted. And so they checked me and they were like, okay, you're ready to push. We're going to call the doctor. So I was like, okay, this was really fast. I don't know how to push if I'm not like feeling the urge to push. And so they like coached me through that and they let me lay on my side to push her out. And she was out, I think, in under 10 minutes, no tearing. They brought her right to my chest. They let me help like pull her up. They did all the newborn stuff like in the room. There were things obviously that they did that wasn't like, it's not a home birth, but it wasn't like horrible. They didn't take her. I could see her the whole time. And I did test positive for group B strep. And so they made us stay for like a full 36 hours since we declined antibiotics. And that was the hardest part, was staying in the hospital because they wanted her on her back alone in this little plastic tub. And I just wanted nothing to do with that. And so I think I stayed awake the entire visit because she was on my chest and I didn't want them to like come in and say, you can't sleep with her on you. But overall, it was the best possible hospital experience that we could have had. And I know a lot of people start at the hospital and then they move to a home birth, and I kind of did things the opposite, but I firmly believe like that was right where God wanted me to be. For whatever reason, there was no medical emergency, but I think I felt most at peace there, and I was able to get relief. And I didn't have, that was a part I left out. My 2 daughters had woken up early that morning and they wanted me, which I wasn't available. I was laboring. And so they wanted daddy. And so not having him available, I was like, they need him, but I need him. Yeah. And so I don't think I was able to fully surrender to the birth process because I had them there. And so I think going to the hospital where it was solely focused on me, I think just allowed me to relax enough to go into labor and progress and ultimately have another really great birth experience.
So it takes like a different kind of strength to really change your plan, especially after you had a beautiful home birth and, you fought for that in the past. So it can be really hard to change your plan. So how did you distinguish between giving up and just really listening to your intuition in that moment of those choices?
Yeah, I think there's, when you're in the throes of labor and you're like, I can't do this anymore, usually that's when you're so close to meeting your baby. But because I think contractions had kind of fizzled out and I wasn't like in labor land, I was fully like, this is not, I think, again, none of the things that previously brought me calm and brought me peace to like push on, none of those things were working.
Mm-hmm.
And I think ultimately too, just a peace from God. There was no panic. Like there was no fear. It was total peace. Labor is so mentally and emotionally involved that I don't think I had the capacity for it unmedicated. I needed relief. And so I just went with that.
Yeah, that's really good. And how was this hospital transfer different than your first?
It was so different, I think, because it was on my own terms. It wasn't emergent. There was no ambulance ride. We packed our bags and we drove and we talked with the girls. My oldest, who is very much an empath, was worried. And I remember saying to her, like, look at my face. I am so at peace with this decision. I am not afraid, which is such a miracle because, again, I just, especially after not liking hospitals in general and then having my first daughter there pretty traumatically, the fact that I was willing to go there, and on my own terms, it was so different. It was very peaceful.
Yeah, that's really good. And, you have spoke highly of your husband being a really good support, your second midwife and your doula. What do you feel is one thing that a support person can truly do for a laboring mom that makes a big difference?
I think holding space, holding peace and calm. As someone who's highly empathetic myself, I can sense when people are worried and when people are stressed out. And so my husband, he educated himself right along with me. Again, he's pretty go with the flow, but I also wanted him to be on board and not just going along with it. And so I think because he was at peace and he was calm and he was educated, and my birth team had established so much rapport with me,
Mm-hmm.
they knew exactly what to say, exactly what to do. They knew my wishes, they knew my fears. I think knowing the birth mom so deeply and also just trusting her and letting her lead, not questioning anything. And if you are like doing it, away from a laboring mom, but a deep sense of knowing and connection and then being at peace in the birth space.
Yeah, I love that. And why is it so important to have a team that helps you feel safe and supported?
Again, I think, like I mentioned earlier, my midwife was so great I knew she was trained. I knew she was medically, I just felt really safe, me and baby, under her care. But also, I am so glad that I hired my doula for the emotional support, for the prayers, and I told her too, I said, I might not even need you. I might just want you to support my daughter. And so just knowing that she wasn't just there for me, she was there for my daughter because that was so important that she felt safe and she wasn't scared. I really wanted, if she decides to become a mother herself one day, I wanted her to see what birth could look like other than, what the movies may show her. So yeah, just a person for each of those needs was really, really helpful.
Yeah, I love that. And when you feel safe, it helps to have better outcomes, I believe. So after these 3 very different birth journeys, what is one thing that you know for sure about your own motherly intuition today that you did not know before your first was born?
Man, I think as women, we doubt ourselves a lot. But if there's one thing that labor and birth has shown me, it's that our intuitions are so strong. And I firmly believe that God gives that to each mother, and He gives us our babies. Like, He knew our families ahead of time and perfectly placed all of them, in our family. And so I think with each of those different births, speaking up for myself in my first birth, trusting myself in the second birth, and kind of having that redemption. And then in the third, knowing that I could very well do another unmedicated birth. Like, again, that fight in me to like prove people wrong. I think with my third, my intuition, I don't know, who I am as a person just softened. I had nothing to prove anymore. I just wanted to birth how I wanted to birth. And if an epidural was the, lazy way out, which I don't think it is, or if that was, weak of me, I didn't care. I just knew that was what I needed after the last 3 months of mental fatigue. I just knew that that's what I needed. And again, my midwife initially and my doula were not that they weren't supportive of that. They just knew my desire to have a home birth. And I think they knew what I was capable of. And so they wanted that for me. They didn't want to, let me make that decision flippantly.
Yeah.
But I think when we tune into that God-given intuition, man, there is so much peace, because for every decision you make as a mom, you're going to have someone saying, absolutely don't do that. And someone else saying, oh, you totally should do that. And so I think the labor process, the birthing process, it really forces us to tune in to what we want and what feels best for me as a mom, and allowed me to shut out any other noise or opinions.
Yeah. No, that's really good. And I like to end every show with one question, and that is, if you could speak one piece of empowering wisdom into the hearts of the mothers listening, what would that be?
Again, trust the God-given intuition. Trust that. Shut out the noise with pregnancy decisions, with birthing decisions, motherhood. And also, if something feels like, if you don't feel settled and at peace, don't write that off. Listen to that. I think that's so, so important with any decisions that you're making.
Yeah, no, that's really good. And I just want to say thank you, Julie, for coming on Her Birth, Her Story.
Thank you so much.
Wow, those stories were so amazing, even though there obviously were some pieces of trauma that Julie had to overcome. I love how she just openly shares her stories, but also talks about the importance of the counseling that she went through, and even talking with a birth coach just to really help process your birth. And if you're someone who has walked through a traumatic birth, this is encouragement for you to really process your birth. Don't just write it off. Don't just accept it, but really work through it to just help you not hold on to that trauma, especially if you're planning on birthing any more children. And just like she had said, no two births are the same. And I think it's great that when we learn from one birth, then we can really better prepare ourselves for the next. So if this story inspired you or empowered you in any way, please share it with another mama who needs to hear it. And don't forget to like, rate, review the show. This helps us to be able to reach more moms. And as always, remember that this is your body, your baby, and your birth. We are reclaiming birth one story at a time. I also want to add this disclaimer that this is not to be taken as medical advice. And just remember, these are people's real experiences. These are things that moms have went through. This is their real, raw experience, their own personal convictions, and none of this is to be taken as medical advice. Please make sure that if you are seeking medical advice, then reach out to your own provider so that you can figure out what is best for you.